Joseph Campbell, in The Power of Myth, gives us a variety of ways of understanding myth and mythology. We've reviewed a lot of them in previous presentations to this point. Let's look now at some ways of summing up different approaches to myth as providing a way to the transcendent, ways of understanding gods, and see why myths have such power in community. Each mythology has a listing of creative or created beings that are present at the beginning, depending on the creation myth. These listings are called pantheons. The god or gods of creation are primordial. Some are uncreated, some have created themselves out of their own will, and others may be defined as being itself. These are all the primordial beings present from any beginning or even eternally, completely outside of time. Then there are titans, which very often represent natural forces that are unleashed by creation. Sometimes the titans are gods, but sometimes they are created or generated as children. How they are created is often left out. Then there are those gods which are the intermediaries that gain control from the titans, which may or may not be their own parents, just as the titan Kronos is the father of the god Zeus. The gods control the natural powers of creation, as Zeus or Thor control lightning and thunder. Then we humans arise, and we must put ourselves into the right action determined by these gods to keep them from unleashing their powers on us. Human rituals are there to follow the law and keep the punishing, emotionally tempestuous gods at bay. Poseidon or Neptune is especially subject to emotional tides, if you kept my drift. But I won't continue. You're welcome. There are a variety of approaches to the nature of God. In pantheism, God is everywhere and in everything. In polytheism, there are many gods, each representing different forces of nature and human virtues or vices, but at play with us and one another with their very human emotions and character traits, falling in love with humans and generating demigods like Percy Jackson in the process. Monotheism is the belief in one true God as creator and ruler over all. This view of God might be the more common contemporary view, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Atheism is the belief that there is no God, or that God and the gods are merely a human creation. Then finally, and more recently, we find homotheism, where humans themselves are the gods, or the humans, in networking themselves together in the data stream of the internet, create a bigger consciousness, which is a god. In myth, the creation of self, and thereby destructive powers as well, lies with the gods and goddesses. Some creation gods include both aspects of the male and female. Some cultures that are agricultural tend to give up their own power to nature and the cycles of life. These cultures tend to be matriarchal, with Mother Earth as the creator. Intuition, peace, enlightenment, and collective work mark these cultures and their stories as very different from the hunter cultures. Time in agricultural cultures is cyclical and repetitive, as noted in the previous presentation. Bruce Lincoln associates these cultures with the Greek term logos, or reason. Other cultures believe in the dominance of humans over nature. These are associated with the male patriarchy of the hunter clans and the sky or water. Death, decay, and conflict are part of these individualistic groups. Lincoln places these cultures as authoritarian mythos cultures. Over time, myths evolve, but modern-day stories often focus on human agency and human control over nature during the Anthropocene, the geological age where humans are the chief shapers of the earth and its climate. Myths are stories with authority and effect. They answer age-old questions that humans have always struggled to answer. Mythology is a separate topic and usually follows the collective stories of a particular group and the evolution of those stories. And the pantheons belong to that separate line of inquiry. You can also study myths as pure literature, comparative literature, as reflective of anthropological principles or psychology, philosophy, and religion. Myths open many doors and have power in many spheres of influence, explaining much of human experience and social organizations and rituals. If interested in pursuing myths as an object of study, recognize the power of myths themselves as stories. Read the mythic narratives as much as you can, interpret them based on your own transcendent questions, focus on the ones that interest you, look for epiphanies, read interpretations about what the myths mean, focus on what they may have meant to people who told them or lived by them in ancient times. Read texts about how myths affect society. The next presentation will deal with some mythic motifs and further our discussion of Joseph Campbell's Power of Myth book.